Let's see who's sponsoring tonight's Hazmat Guys Roundtable. Hazmat 101 Consultants. Hazmat 101 Consultants and their instructors can provide quality consulting and virtual or in-person hazardous materials training for your agency. Owner and lead instructor Bob Cascignano is also available for lecturing at your fire or hazmat conference and has in fact done many speaking engagements across the country. Visit their site at www.hazmatconsultants.com or email Bob Cascignano at bob@hazmat101consultants.com. For over 20 years, K&R Plaques have had the pleasure of helping clients choose awards for the people they want to honor. Their state-of-the-art equipment allows clients to design, customize, and personalize the awards they choose for that special someone. With one of the largest selections of plaques, awards, trophies, and clothing apparel, they can deliver quality products to satisfy any customer needs. No order is too big or too small. Visit their website at www.knrplaques.com or email at sales@knrplaques.com. Responder Training. RTE is the leading company in delivering propane training along with emergency response equipment. Responder Training has many propane flaring kits, water injection kits, accessories, and replacement parts available. They also sell the only commercially available 1-inch propane flare kit, appropriately named the Dragon Slayer, because size does matter. Contact our good friend, owner instructor Ron Huffman for more information. You can reach him at 765-524-4848. You can email Ron at respondertraining.rdh.gmail.com or peruse his website at respondertraining.com. Northeast Hazmat has your supplies for leaks. Easy vac pumps, stingers, hoses, rupture seals, and now carrying fire blankets and hazmat apparel. If you'd like to sponsor the show and help keep live hazmat conversations coming in the future and help send at least one lucky participant to a national level hazmat conference, send an email to bob@thehazmatguys.com and he'll send you the information. Thanks a lot. Now on with the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hazmat Guys Roundtable. This is for May of 2024. I am joined by the cohorts, Bob Kosh, Mike Monaco, Jay-Z's on assignment, and we have the ever-present Ben Herskowitz. Thank you for coming on, Ben.
Impressive control room you have. It takes all those buttons to keep the show running.
How's everybody doing?
Oh,
Good.
Nothing else? That's it? Everybody's just doing good. Great.
Tough.
All right.
That's it.
Thanks for coming by tonight, guys.
Well,
Good
That's
night.
the end of the show. Thanks for coming.
I'm shot tonight. I got nothing. I don't know. I will do my best to add whatever I can, but I honestly got nothing. So, Ben, what do you got?
I know Ben had the topic.
Well,
Yeah.
Oh. All right, I'll just restate what he just said in case you didn't hear what he said. What is a hazmat incident? Which is actually a pretty good question because, like, what's the defining line between?
You know, when you dive actually into this question a little bit more, you start to get that blurry line that we talked about with I believe Rick Emery that one day, where we were like, the difference between offensive and defensive. And then it's like, well, if all offensive operations get intimate with the product, how do we allow a firefighter to deal with a gas tank? How do we allow them to do a natural gas leak in somebody's house? Like, aren't they becoming intimate with the product? So yeah, that's a really good question. And it's a lot. It has consequences far above and beyond just, is this a hazmat run, right? A lot of our funding comes from whether or not somebody clicks on the fact that, oh, this was a hazmat run and this wasn't. A very great example of this was New York City back right after 2001, where the fire department would go on technically thousands of hazmat runs between CO and gas leaks and gasoline and accidents. The NYPD was marking every single run that involved any chemical as hazardous material. The New York City Fire Department was not. So when it came time to get funding for hazmat, even though the New York City Fire Department was leaps and bounds above in response with hazmat, the NYPD ended up getting most of the hazmat funding because technically they were going on more hazmat runs than anybody else was. So this is a question that is far, far beyond a simple answer.
I love it. What do you think?
The other thing too is that, you talk about the funding and stuff. A lot of departments don't charge. Like my department, City of Orlando, because it's the way it's written in their charter. We, the fire department, aren't allowed to charge for hazmat response. So if we used absorbent, pads, booms, whatever, we got to replace it from streets and drainage department. Now, if they charge, I don't know, but we were never allowed. And there's a lot of departments that do charge, and that's how they fund their team. Quite honestly,
all right,
especially with grants drying up. So
weird little technical question: if the federal government says that you have the right to go after and replenish things, but your charter doesn't, which one tops what? Like, can't the local say, well, wait a second, the federal says we have the right to do this despite what the charter says?
I would think so, but knowing how our city government works, they're it, so yeah, we were never allowed to do it.
Tell them they're charging Disney and the state of Florida will be all over it.
Yeah. No, but that's a good question. What makes a hazmat a hazmat? Like, even, and I really am reluctant to steer this even temporarily into this zone, is like, why is batteries a hazmat thing?
Well,
like,
I can
there's
answer that
valid
question.
arguments of why it's not.
I personally feel like the reason that the batteries became the hazmat is because the hazmat are the figure it out group, just based upon like how we're trained to think about a situation. So when everybody else is going, okay, this needs to be figured out, they pass it off to hazmat. Do I think it needs to be a hazmat situation? No, absolutely not. I firmly believe that operations level can do everything that is needed to overpack and mitigate one of these batteries. But
I think, assuming you can.
We did the same thing with COVID. All of a sudden, that was a hazmat. Yeah, we hear you.
Excellent.
But yeah, all of a sudden, COVID became a hazmat call, and everybody's like, "Well, wait a minute." And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but they didn't need us, and then all of a sudden, they need us like yesterday.
Yeah, we had that happen with Ebola.
A lot of things. Yeah, and here's the thing too, like somebody said, oh, you guys run 7 just hazmat rig, and that's all it does is run hazmat calls. Is, I don't know what the number was. It was like 600 and some hazmat calls. And they're like, man, that's busy. I go, now understand something. 2/3 of that is fuel spills or natural gas leaks. Right. So is that considered a hazmat call, or is it when you get into some type of level of PPE, making some entry or whatever? So I think different places have different lanes that they go in, so to speak.
I think to Mike's point, when that's what I'm looking for. They're basically treating symptoms. we're allowed to do risk assessments. The fire department has to have SOGs. So when something new comes out, arguably we have that skill set. And then if you look at NFIRS, the national reporting, we had a meeting about a week or two ago in our state, and they said, why is it that NFIRS shows 30,000 hazmat calls in Pennsylvania, but the hazmat teams only report 500? And digging into that, we found that NFIRS has 8 exceptions where you don't have to fill out the hazmat tab. And so that's what we're leaning as possibly how you define a hazmat.
All right. So what are those exceptions? Then let's go through the like, as long as we're diving into this question, what are those exceptions?
So one of them is like gasoline less than 25 gallons, no other actions required. So in our mind, it's not in a waterway, it's not affecting soil. You have like paint less than 55 gallons, propane less than 100 gallons. And it's like things for consumers. So if it's a food product or consumer grade or packaged for consumers, those are the exceptions where you don't have to fill out the hazmat tab.
That's for everything?
What now? When do you have to call like
call a team? So in Pennsylvania, that was the problem. We had this meeting to say, hey, look, hazmat teams need to go to hazmat incidents. That's what the law says. People aren't doing it. You have to follow based on the definition that's in Pennsylvania Act 165, which is the law that governs hazmat in Pennsylvania. The problem is Act 165 has 3 definitions for a hazardous material. It's either NFPA, the hazardous, I think it's substance, which is also OSHA, hazardous substance, and it meets one of the 9 DOT class. But there's no definition for what a hazmat incident. It's kind of like the Supreme Court trying to define obscenity. I can't really define it, but I know it when I see it.
Right. It's fucking crazy. So, all right. So, well, I mean, because if you think about, like, if you look at, like the DOT, right, where they turn around and they go, okay, anything in table 2,000 and more pounds to be considered hazardous material and to be labeled. So, like, you can't. But I would consider 25 gallons or 25 pounds of propane to be relatively hazardous. It'll definitely make it'll make your house go boom.
For sure. And then there's also the opposite extreme. So OSHA, I'm going to paraphrase this, but any material that has one or more properties that is hazardous to the health or safety of employees. Well, at 32 degrees, water has a property that's probably responsible for more slip, trip, fall injuries than any other liquid on the planet.
Right.
But I don't think hazmat teams should be out there with squeegees every time it rains.
Yeah, and if you inhale it, you pretty much die.
Yeah, that too.
But all right, so what? All right, besides it being like a money thing, like, I don't know. You can draw the line at any point to make it hazmat or not a hazmat. Like, the devil's in the details. I think that's where it really lies.
It is. And then with OSHA, so I've actually written requests for standard interpretation, and I've had a few come back. We had one, for example, does EMS need hazmat ops? And in Pennsylvania, the answer is supposed to be yes, because they have a requirement to be able to. Right? If they didn't have that requirement, they could just hang out on the outskirts. That presents a problem for us because we need someone to stand by for us, and they're supposed to be us. But then OSHA also draws the line that says if you want to plug a saddle tank, you have to be a technician with a hazmat team. That's a letter of standard interpretation all the way back in 1991 for the Pennsylvania Turnpike, because the Highway Safety Patrol guys wanted to plug saddle tanks. They also say if you deliver fuel oil, so Ben Herskowitz Oil Delivery Company hires Bobby Salvinson. He's got his hazmat driver's license. He shows up to work. He pumps from a 600,000 gallon tank into a 6,000 gallon tanker. He drives to Mike Monaco's house and he can deliver 250 gallons of fuel oil. The minute Ben steps on the little fill hose in the bottom, Bobby, unless he's a technician, is no longer qualified to pump from the 250 gallon tank back into the 6,000 gallon. That was also a letter of standard interpretation from the 90s. Do I agree with those? Not necessarily, but that's arguably the law. So Hazmat 2 is a private company. We don't fall under any of the quote government exceptions. So you have to follow the rules as they're written.
That's incredible.
Interesting.
So really, it's then kind of up to almost the AHJ to figure out what it is.
And so that's what we're trying to do in our county is offer suggestions to county government, governs us. And as a hazmat team, we operate on their behalf. So we're, a contractor operating for a government, but certainly we'd like to have some input. But again, when you try to define a hazmat incident, you're like, well, yeah, it's really easy. It's anything involving hazmat. Well,
right.
When I teach classes, I love the following two jokes. Everything is chemicals. So you go to like some vegan place and they're like, only organic. Okay, so everything with carbon. And do you guys clean your dishes with dihydrogen monoxide? You'd never, right? So everything's chemicals. And also, consequently, everything is radioactive. So everybody's afraid of class 7 stuff. Like, you're radioactive. That's how we know how old the dinosaurs were. When someone finally kills me with a shovel, someone will dig me up 100 years from now and figure out when it was based on the carbon-14 left in my bones. That's it. I'm radioactive now. I'll be radioactive then.
It's valid.
Oh, that's great.
It's interesting to hear all the silly little rules. It's like when you read those ridiculous rules, like you can't chew bubble gum after midnight while walking down the dirt road in Texas. Like it's like, what? Where the hell did that come from?
Right.
And all these ridiculous things. And like Ron Huffman says, common sense is not common, and it's right.
Well,
even like George Carlin, he said, he goes, you think about how stupid half the people are, and half of them are dumber than that.
But I guess when you start dealing with that fine line of technicalities, you can't have common, right? Because it then you're leaving things up to interpretation. Well, whose interpretation? And then, okay, well, this governor is in this year, and things like that interpretation allows for too much. I'm not going to say insecurity. What's the right word? But instability in the system. And we require stability to be able to predict, the future and budgets and laws and all that other stuff. So yeah, at some point there has to be a line, and there's always going to be something stupid that lands on both sides of the line.
And that's the dilemma,
Yeah.
right?
And
like
they wonder why shit gets screwed up so much.
Right.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be simpler just to have a simple set of rules? Like, imagine having like a leaflet.
No.
Yeah, but think about it, like, because that's simple. It's just like when we generalize in class, right? And I tell students all the time when I begin the class, I'm like, I'm gonna lie to you. I taught a week of chemistry a couple of weeks ago in California, and I start the class off by being like, I'm gonna lie to you. Like, this whole week is pretty much a lie because I have to now generalize. And anytime we generalize or we simplify, we leave out more and more of the truth. So when we start to get to the point, and I'm sure the law is the same way, where if you just try to be very simple, you end up leaving out a tremendous amount of truth and details. But if you try to go over detail orientated, you end up not being, you get so bogged down in red tape that you can't move.
I think part of the problem is 70% of the world's attorneys reside in the United States. And every policy in every major department, the last person who reviews it is an attorney. And they're going to add all the little,
True.
We're like, hey, we're going to enter into an agreement. I'm going to do work for you. You're going to pay me. It's pretty straightforward. But then the lawyers get involved, like, well, what if, and then they throw all these little things in, and now your document went from a sentence, I work, you pay, to this 40-page document that only the lawyers know how to read.
Yeah. Yeah. But in all fairness, it's because we sue
It's
the
called
hell out
job
of each other.
security.
Right.
True. So true.
I don't know.
So, all right. So as a responder responding in, like, how would we then view it? Like, not technical, I mean, I think I would kind of just view it as, can this substance hurt somebody? Then I need to make sure that the public can't be hurt by it. I'm going to take care of it. Like, is that an okay stance as the ground level, your fire officer, your firefighter, maybe even your chief that's responding on scene? Like, is that good enough to go off of?
I think it is for like FDNY, where it's all one department. It just becomes extra resources.
Okay.
It gets gray when you're involving multiple agencies, right? Because, for example, we talk about what's in smoke. So every fire department's able to handle fire calls. Then we go, all right, but there's hydrogen cyanide in smoke. And they're like, okay, well, if you're smart, we'll wear our SCBA longer, but then let's go to, we have a facility a mile from where I sit right now that uses hydrogen cyanide detectors to look for cyanide. That's not the same. So cyanide, a little bit in smoke, is a hazmat incident small enough for a fire department, but we label it a fire. But if this electroplating company has a problem and they lose cyanide, that's obviously something that the fire department probably doesn't have the resources to cope with.
But yet it is again, wouldn't those two still land in the question of, can it hurt me? Like, most of the time you're dealing with overhaul. Yes, there's cyanide in there, but if it hurt us to some massive degree, then the problem would have been dealt with and it would be considered a hazmat. But the fact that for the majority of the times we can have our mask off while doing overhaul and people aren't dropping dead left and right, then it lands outside of that category of, this is going to hurt somebody. So even though there's chemicals in there that can hurt us, the fact that it doesn't kind of justifies the fact that it's not a hazmat scene.
I feel that way. I think that also some of that comes down to what you're educated to deal with. And so where's the line? So let's take a basic hazmat ops class, talk about call it the confined space 4, right? LAL, oxygen, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, sulfur. And then somebody takes a class and they're like, well, you could also detect other chemicals if there's a slight drop in oxygen. And now we're back to where you were talking about generalization. Okay, well, I can do some basic math. 0.1% equals 1,000 parts per million. So if I see a drop, that means there was 1,000 parts per million of stuff put in. Now, all of us are like, well, no. You've got to account for the other 4/5. So that's 5,000 parts per million. And then you get someone who really knows meters and they go, wait,
what about dead band? Right.
3% dead band. And so if you didn't bump check your meter, it's actually 15,000 parts per million. And then it drops down to the 0.1% resolution. And now you're back to 5,000. Look at the NIOSH Pocket Guide, how many chemicals IDLH are between, 0 and 15,000.
Right.
Quite a few. And so I got some training, like propane. Is propane a hazmat incident? Well, if it's a 5-gallon home barbecue grill, probably the training you get in the fire academy, adequate. You have a 30,000 bulk storage facility. The consequences, it's the same chemical.
Right.
It's just the quantity. Now the consequences or potential consequences drive me to believe that's a hazmat incident. And so it may not be harming me right now, but it has this big potential.
It has the potential. Right.
Well, sorry. So then is it potential that it drives the line? Because I mean,
so.
like, for us in this show, like, we consider gasoline a hazmat, but everybody is very complacent with it, putting it in their cars on a daily basis. You'll see the picture, the videos of the girls, pulling down their cardigans and creating all types of static, and then the thing goes on fire. And now all of a sudden, it's a big deal. But like the complacency of gasoline is everybody doesn't take it seriously until it's a problem. Well, so is it potential is the problem?
It is potential. And Ben gave the perfect example, right? And I kind of had to do a quick, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because he said, a barbecue propane tank may not be considered a hazmat. I come from a city where we are so dense and so packed that for me, any amount of propane that's leaking out has the potential to easily find a low spot and a source of ignition. So for us, any size propane bottle, whether it's a little camping propane cylinder or, something larger, is immediately considered a hazardous material because it has the potential. If you're out, in Ben's area, you probably require a lot more product before it has the potential to hurt somebody. So now we're back to the AHJ and the specific situation that product is in to determine whether or not it's going to hurt somebody.
I like that.
I think it's as cross.
Yeah,
as
definitely,
like a Venn
definitely
diagram.
dependent on where you're at.
I think it's highly dependent on where you're
at.
No,
that's fine.
I think it's a Venn diagram of potential impact, knowledge and training, and resources. Like I can show up on an engine tonight at a chlorine leak, and I'm just a really educated firefighter without the backup of the equipment and the other team. So just because I have the training doesn't mean that I have, and again, if chlorine in what level? Is it like did somebody find a calibration gas cylinder of chlorine? That's almost a non-event. So it's quantity, it's training, it's equipment. I could have the training, it could be a quantity, but I don't have level A suits.
Yeah, it's product, container, environment, behavioral prediction models.
Write that into a policy that everybody can understand.
Well, you need technicians to be able to interpret that for the people that don't know. I don't understand why nobody is getting this. Damn it.
ChatGPT just entered the chat.
Well, like I said, for us, don't forget the solicitor. Right? That's after you write it, they're going to have to rewrite it or evaluate it at least.
Yeah, I never cared about the solicitor. The solicitor can check my spelling.
That's a different solicitor, Mike.
Oh.
That's solicitation. Close.
I love it. All right. I think we kicked that one around for a little while. 32 minutes. That's not too bad.
Not at all.
Appreciate everybody for coming on out and listening to us gabber for a little while. And as always, we'll see you next Tuesday. Not really. Next month.
See ya.